Good morning. My name is Evan Diamadopoulos. I'm a professor here at the Technical University of Crete, and on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to welcome you to the fourth international conference on responsible consumption and production. This conference is an action which is due to the existence of the European University Alliance, EURECA-PRO, and the theme of the alliance is based on the 12th United Nations Development Goal, which is responsible consumption and production. This is actually the fourth conference taking place. The first one was during COVID, and it was online, organized by our lead partner, which is the Technical University of the Open. The second one took place in León, Spain, organized by the University of León, as another partner of the Alliance. And the third was organized also by us, the Technical University of Crete, and took place in the old city of Chania. So this, the fourth one, we decided to move it outside the city, by the sea. Maybe it was a mistake. People are probably prone to move to the beach. That's supposed to be this closed room, but anyway, when it gets hot later, they're going to come to the air-conditioned room. Before we start, I would like to invite our rector, Professor Michalis Zervakis, to come and say a few welcoming words.
Thank you very much, Professor Diamadopoulos. My name is Michalis Zervakis, and on behalf of the Technical University of Crete, I would like to welcome you all here at this nice event, the fourth International Conference on Responsible Consumption and Production. Well, the theme of the conference has vast implications in both technology and society. So essentially it's an interdisciplinary area involving all aspects of engineering, but also social sciences and behavior sciences. It's very important for the society as we face the climate change and all the pollution effects in the environment to think of all aspects of sustainability in processes, in services, in material production and consumption. So essentially, the topic of the conference is of vast importance to science, and I hope you enjoy the conference and also enjoy your stay here at Chania. The environment is, I think, is interesting, has a lot of historical monuments, archaeological value, but I think the most important will be the topics that will be considered in the conference. So I hope you enjoy and wish you a good stay over here in Chania.
Thank you, Michael. Now, I'll just give you some information regarding the 2 days that we're going to be here. First of all, the coffee will be at the lobby, just outside. And at lunch, we have to cross the road, and you can take the bridge to go to the other part of the hotel, over across the street, and we're going to have our lunch there. In order to have lunch, you have to present the little voucher that was given to you with your name tag here. It's inside. And also, we're going to finish today around 6 o'clock. And at 7 o'clock, there are going to be buses just parked outside here. We're going to go on the buses, and then we're going to drive about 25-30 kilometers west of this venue to a very nice Cretan restaurant with traditional food and traditional music and dancing. So please be there, because it's not easy to find a place where we're going, and you don't have very much time. People have you stay in hotels nearby, they may have a chance to go to the rooms, but those who, let's say they're from, they stay in Chania, they don't have enough time to go to the city, to the hotel, and come back here within an hour. Okay, having said,
the buses will be at the parking lot in front of the reception, so
so buses will be across the street in the parking lot.
Sure.
And the buses are going to bring us back here to this place.
Okay.
So if some people have rented cars, so you don't have to bring your cars, take your cars. You can take the buses will going to bring us here. Okay, finally, I would like to thank all the people who did the hard work for this conference. That does not include me. I was supervising the work. And I would like to thank you, all of you who decided to come here. And I hope you enjoy your stay and enjoy the conference. Very exciting papers. I had the opportunity to read all the papers that were submitted. And I think from a scientific point of view, it's a very, very good conference. Having said all these things, I would like now to proceed and invite Professor Jason Hallett, who is our keynote speaker. I'll just say a few words about Jason. I like to say this thing, Jason, that Jason is American, but he's a professor at Imperial College. And not sent here by President Trump, right? Okay, Jason Hallett is Professor of Sustainable Chemical Technology. He holds a Royal Academy of Engineering chair in Emerging Technologies in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Imperial College London. He also served as co-director of UK's National Supergen Bioenergy Hub. He has authored or co-authored over 200 publications and 10 patents. These publications have generated over 35,000 citations with an H index of 63, probably a lot more now than and this includes citations in the most highly cited papers in his two primary fields, ionic liquids and biorefining. His research has been recognized with prizes from the Royal Society, the Royal Academy of Engineering, the Royal Society of Chemistry, and iChemie. He has been profiled by many noteworthy scientific magazines and journals, including the Washington Post, Scientific American, Chemical and Engineering News, Chemistry World, and Science. Since 2013, he has received more than 60 million euros in research funding from UK research and innovation, industry and EU programs, and has leveraged these collaborations into 9 spin-out companies to act as vehicles for the translation of his research into practice. His first spin-out company, Lixea, built a pilot plant which he designed and which was constructed in Sweden, commissioned and operated since 2022. Lixea recently announced a 50 million euro demonstration plant to be constructed in Slovakia in 2026. Jason currently leads a group of 22 PhDs and 13 postdocs alongside 30 researchers in spin-out companies to ensure their efforts are translated into academic, scientific, and promoting impact to society. So, Jason, the floor is yours, and we're very eager to listen to you to present what is the future of completely sustainable chemical technology.
Thank you. Awkward pause here. Thank you. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I mean, thank you all for coming. It's quite an honor to be asked to open a conference and EURECA-PRO also being such a great institution and alliance in Europe. It's really overwhelming to be here. This is going to be a little bit different, this presentation. And and I'll explain why in a moment. But I love this picture. My wife took this picture. It's not why I like it, but that's me. I always wear very stylish shirts. You'll see why. I do joke I've won 2 international fashion awards. Not for the way I dress, unfortunately. I deserve it. That's a picture of me in Antarctica, holding an iron equipment. It's a little bit of a joke because the iron equipment doesn't freeze. Of course, it was actually only about 2 degrees that day on the coast. But that's me on the coast of Antarctica. It was a very odd experience. First of all, you can see my glasses. There's a transition lenses, and they're completely black. Antarctica is an incredibly brilliantly bright place because there's nothing. It's a desert with a white background. And I was struck when I was there, since I work in biorefining. No matter where you go in the world, there's always nature, but not there. There's nothing. There are no trees, nothing. Rocks and ice, nothing else. It's quite a strange, there are a lot of canyons. It was quite a strange experience. But I always like that picture because it reminds me of that. It was a holiday, but an incredible trip. Okay, so Evan asked me to talk about the future of green and sustainable chemistry, green and sustainable technology. And I thought about this for a while. What is the future? And this is the inevitable conclusion that I really don't know. We were talking last night at dinner. If you had asked me when I was a PhD student, in 2002, 2003, what the future of technology would hold, I don't think smartphone would have been the first thing that I would have come up with. A mini computer inside your phone was not something on the radar. That was 20 years ago. It was unheard of. So I have no idea what's coming. So I'm not going to tell you what's coming, because I don't know. I am going to tell you how I think it will get there. So what we will have to do, how the vehicles by which we will bring new sustainable technologies into the world. And interspersed in that, okay, thank you. Why don't I just go to the slide that explains this? I'll tell you my experience in trying to translate technologies, which I think is the way we can have a positive impact in the future. And I will attempt to tell you why I think that. Whenever a slide goes all black, I really like color, as you can tell, and we'll have some slides on literally on color later on. Whenever a slide goes all black, that is going to be me pontificating on random things that I think are going to happen in the future and why they're there. Those are going to be a little bit depressing, I'll have to warn you up front. Because a lot of the drivers for why I think impact has to come from academia are disappointing to me. Because we really aren't ideally placed to change the world. We're supposed to be putting out ideas out there so other people can change the world. We're not supposed to be the ones doing it. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to. So I have very little faith that anyone else will. And those anecdotes will be very biased. It's my personal opinion. I think I'm supposed to disclaim this does not represent the views of the Imperial College London, but they're probably listening, I have to say. My masters are very, keep a close eye on it. And here and there, I'll tell you about mistakes that I made in translation. I always tell my graduate students, especially, you can only learn from mistakes. If we do an experiment and it does what we thought it would do, we have learned nothing. I already knew ahead of time what was going to happen. So therefore, I haven't learned anything. It's only when things go wrong. It's only when things do what they're not supposed to that you learn something about the world. And it's the same thing with business. It's the same thing with startups. It's only when you do something and it doesn't work out that you learn how the system works or how the system can work. So I think it's very important. And so I don't want to give you the impression that I've been immensely successful with all of these startups. They're all there. We have 9, as Evan said, and there's 2 more coming. And they're all active, so I've had no bankruptcies yet. Maybe misses. But we haven't sold any of them. So I haven't had any actual successes yet. So I have no idea what's going to happen. All of the startups that I've done, I'll talk about several of them later on, are in cleantech, as we say, or sustainable technology. It's the only thing I know about. There are wonderful ways to have very quick impact in other things, like writing software. But I don't know how to write software, so I don't do that. And as I said, I'm not not a prognosticator of what's coming. So I'll try to give you an idea of the vehicle, but I can't tell you where the research direction is, because whatever guess I make is probably wrong. I'm not even doing what I thought I would be doing 5 years ago. So, Evan did a nice introduction of me. I sort of have 10 jobs. So I am a professor. That's the one that pays me. So it's the most important one, because Imperial College signs the paycheck, so they go first on the list. And I have been a professor of chemical engineering for 7 years now. And as I mentioned, co-director of the National Bioenergy Hub, which is an academia industry policy organization trying to promote the aims of biomass in the economy, basically, in the UK. It's all imported biomass in the UK, but still. I have a slightly lesser role in the vaccine manufacturing. I'm going to talk about the vaccine hub, but I will give a funny story about it. So, first anecdote. So the only time I'll talk about vaccines here. I gave a presentation, most prestigious presentation I've ever given until today, at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And so the audience is all prime ministers and presidents and things. The president, they have the badge. The Queen of Norway had her badge on, and it said literally HRH Queen of Norway. That's all it said. Anyway, I gave this talk. There were 3 of us giving talks on vaccines, and the first one was my colleague who directs our hub. His talk was on what if we had a new virus that we've never seen before. How long would we have to stop it from turning into a global pandemic? So what's our timeline to get a vaccine onto the market? And the answer, by the way, is 6 weeks. That's how long he got, 6 weeks. And he said, how long would it take us to get a vaccine to the market right now? 18 months. So 6 weeks, we have 18 months this time. And I went after him, and my talk was, okay, so I did formulations of vaccines. If this vaccine was to reach the market, the first vaccine to reach the market would only be stable at minus 50 degrees Celsius. So you can only deploy it in North America, Western Europe, and a few select other places, but that's it. And so most of the world would sort of be on their own for another year, at least while we figured out how to deal with this. There were 9 people in the audience for that talk. It was in January of 2019. And 10 months later, Imperial, one of the universities, we get a sample of this virus in China that's been running rampant that nobody's seen before. And we had a vaccine in about 4 weeks. It was the first vaccine in the world to go into clinical trials. So I formulated the first vaccine in the world to go into clinical trials, and the first vaccine in the world to fail clinical trials. We were very proud of that. But it reached the market in about 16 months, so we were off by 2. And the first one was stable at minus 50 degrees. So it was Pfizer's. So it was minus 50 degrees. And I got all these calls from CNN and Sky News and all these people saying, you were right, you had this whole thing. I said, look, we all knew this. This is not a surprise. The surprise is nobody cared. The reason I tell that story, first of all, it's a little bit funny. Why were there 9 people in the audience really? Well, Bill Gates was giving a talk in the room next door. So I got 9 people, and Bill Gates probably got the entire rest of the conference. But it does highlight a lot of things that I always feel are wrong with sustainability, is that we say these things, and nobody takes us all that seriously. Especially being an American, it's quite shocking at the moment just how little scientists are believed. But anyway, there you go. It's the last time I'll bring it. What do I do most of my time? The stuff on the right. And so I have co-founded 9 companies, or 7 companies that have launched, and 2 that will launch later this year. And then 2 more that were based on research in my group that I didn't join part of, mostly because I wasn't real knowledgeable about the core technologies, so I didn't really think I could help much. And recently, last year, at the top there, I wrote an article in Chemistry asking me to write a review on startups, and I said that would be the most boring review in human history, a review of green startups. And I don't know what I could say. These people launched this company and it failed. That's basically the history of green chemistry startups. But what I can do is give a perspective on what I think works and what I think doesn't work. And they said, okay. And so I've written some of this down. It was the most fun article I've ever had to write because it was just basically my opinion for 6 pages. It's great. You give it academic a medium to tell people what they think. You get a lot of logos from it. I have a lot of email addresses. It's very confusing. I can't talk about all of it. We could be here all day. I was joking, and 4 hours to talk about all of this stuff. So I've put 6 of them in the presentation, but that would probably take 2 hours. So I put little escape buttons here and there to skip through. So you probably only hear about 3. But Lixia is the oldest. I would definitely talk about Lixia. They do biomass fractionation of wood pulp. It's an awesome company, which is constantly in deep financial trouble because they take on these gigantic projects. But it's a lot of fun. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Nanolox is one of the weirdest companies. It takes steel waste and makes cosmetics out of it, which is the strategist going to keep everything. But sunscreen, basically. So nanoparticles for sunscreen from steel waste. I will definitely talk about DireCycle because it had some awesome things in the news just a couple of days ago. Crete recycles textiles. BioAccess makes a bio-based detergent, which is a laundry detergent that we made in my laboratory that you can use in shampoo. Consume a lot of dish detergent. It's a lot of fun. Interesting area of chemistry to get its practice, I have to say. Then you have a company that recycles magnets, really, with mobile phones and car engines. A company that does CO2 removal, biochar, one that makes redox flow batteries. And then we've launched a couple of the recycled plasterboard, which is a very interesting topic. It's one of the least recycled materials out there. It's very common, plasterboards. Every building, every room in the world. We basically don't recycle it with. And then we have a company we have not named that allegedly is going to recycle plastics. Some of do these without. I think we're a little late to the party of that technology. I will almost certainly talk about Origin, which is a really fun one. Not one of the students started it. It builds solar mini grids in EU. There's a fantastic story. And we even have a phytoremediation company that just launched last year. So a little bit of everything, which is quite a bit of fun. So you hear about some of these in the next few minutes. I often get asked, and I really have no answer, why do you do this? So why do we do entrepreneurship? It took me a long time. That title is not a joke. It took me a very long time to learn how to spell that word. It's a really hard one. It's a French word. Very old. When I started in this era, we started spinning up companies. It was not very popular. It was just outside. Academics are not supposed to do this, right? So you're supposed to just develop technology in the laboratory. You hand it off to BASF or Shell or BP or whoever, and they'll take it to the market. You go away. You've done your job. What we're not supposed to do is try and take it to the market ourselves. And this is no longer true. We've almost seen a complete reversal in the past decade. From academics should not do this to actually, if you're not doing this, you're not a real academic. And I have to say it's been startling to me. And I'm not sure that our job has really changed in that time. So I can't quite put my finger on why that attitude has reversed. But it has been a complete 360. One of the most important things that a spin-up company has to do is generate PR. So public relations, cause attention, make people hear what you're doing. This is really, really important. If you don't draw attention to yourself, you'll disappear quite quickly. And so there's a lot of prizes and awards and competitions and things. The upper left, that's Ida and I from DireCycle accepting the H&M Global Change Award 2023. Which is given out to H&M, so it's given out in Stockholm. They do it in the Stockholm Town Hall, and they do the exact same dinner and ceremony they do for the Nobel Prize. So the closest I will ever come to winning the Nobel Prize, I got to sit there, and they brought the little dessert downstairs with the thing, and I was like, oh my god, it's like I've won the Nobel Prize, except I haven't. The funny thing is, I'm holding that glass ball, so they presented me the founder, the CEO of H&M, the richest person in Sweden. Handed me that glass ball, and I very nearly dropped it. It was hollow. It's actually solid glass, so I very nearly dropped it. It was very embarrassing. But anyway, the DireCycle is all over the news. And I'll show you some of these clippings in a moment, but they're absolutely everywhere. We're in the Vogue in Italy this month, actually, which I think is one of the good Vogues. There's a picture in the upper right of Elixir is being highlighted in Scientific American. We were declared one of the top 10 emerging technologies in 2019. We were declared the world's top bioplastics company. Elixir does not make bioplastics, but it's quite an honor. We're the best bioplastics company, even though we don't make bioplastics. I'm in that picture. So I took a picture of the three founders. There's Florence on the right, Aggie in the middle, and Jason's right. Florence, Aggie, Jim. They cut me out of the picture in Scientific American. I'm in the article. I'm not very embarrassing. I'll show you one later on that they couldn't cut. But the one that made it into the magazine, I'm not in there. There's one from Nanolox, which basically is one of the box inside the steel mill. And there's Aggie and I, the Swedish television, being interviewed in Elixir's pilot plant. Elixir is now a Swedish company, so the pilot plant's in Sweden. I've been interviewed in 6 different languages, even though I only speak English. It's quite impressive. So you can find on YouTube all sorts of clips of me talking apparently in Bulgarian, but actually they just dubbed me over. So what does all this actually produce? So the PR is one thing, but I always say there is no more difficult job I am familiar with than being the CEO of a startup. You have to do everything. They have to do absolutely everything. I thought being an academic was difficult. That's crazy what they have to do. They have to launch the technology, they have to launch the business, they have to pitch to investors, they have to do the taxes, they have to make sure the payroll goes out on time. They have to do absolutely everything. There's no staff. No administrative staff, there's no janitorial staff, they have to empty the trash cans. I mean, nothing. They have to do absolutely everything. It's a horrible job. But what it does is it trains these, in my case, usually former PhD students, to be leaders immediately. And it's a really impressive set of skills that you can develop while still in your 20s. And there's a picture at the top of Clementine and Borgia when they opened one of their early solar plants. In India, Clementine's the very tall one to the left. Clementine was named in the first Forbes 30 under 30. She was one of the 30 winners. 28 of the 30 people were either 28 or 29 years old. One was 26, and she was 22. And she was named one of the 30 most impressive people in science and engineering. She's had a documentary made about her, and she's opened now 250 solar plants in India. She's Belgian. She speaks 9 languages, including Mandarin and Hindi. That's an absolutely incredible person. She's getting old now, but she's 32 now. So it's pretty much, I keep joking that she can't do a 30 and 30 anymore. She's over 30. But really, really impressive. We'll hear a bit about that in a moment. That company's amazing. There's Ida, who she's been profiled in the Evening Standard, and what was the one a couple weeks ago, the Sunday Times in London. And also I keep teasing her. She's the only person in the Sunday Times and the Institute of Chemical Engineers that's written for profiles of. She's a Palestinian refugee who lives in London. She's from Gaza, actually, who lives in London, and started a textile company as a side project for her PhD. Absolutely incredible. So we'll hear about Ida more in a moment. And I took the picture at the bottom. It was Florence, my students, winning the INCORCP Award for most impressive young engineer or something, which was really great because she's not an engineer, she's actually a chemist, but she was named the best young engineer in the UK. She accepted the award from Warwick Davis. She did not know who he was. I said, oh my God, it's Warwick Davis from Star Wars and Willow. And she's like, I have no idea who it was. But anyway, she did an interview a couple years ago now for Venturing Women on why women would want to start companies. Why would a woman want to be an engineer in the first place, much less an engineer and an entrepreneur? And why she decided that she didn't like running the company and would rather run technology. So she changed her job from CEO to CTO. It was great interview. Okay, so that's my preamble. So what are we really going to talk about? I'm not going to talk a lot about my research. I'll sneak in a couple slides here and there, otherwise I feel like I've shorn my duties. People will forget I'm a scientist if I don't occasionally talk about research, so it's in there. The backbone of our research is solvents. I'm actually a thermodynamicist once upon a time who likes to work with solvents. So I work on things where solvents are needed. That means I don't do things that are entirely gas phase. I think they're very important, but they have nothing to do with me, so I don't do them. Mainly in biorefining or circular economy. So I do a lot of recycling, a lot of making things from biomass. So we're looking at how to make future materials without emitting so much CO2. That's basically the basis of our research. I use ionic liquids mostly because they're fun to play with. And when I started using ionic liquids, which was almost 20 years ago now, there was no hope that they could have any commercial. There was one process in the commercial space, and it was about 3 tons a year. There are now 12. 4 of which are mines. It's a little bit cheating, but still, there are now 12. But there's been a lot of progress. And so most of my early research was in trying to convince people that ionic liquids had a future as a solvent in the commercial sphere. I'll explain next how that happened. In recycling, I like to do things that are different. And so mostly our recycling activities are on things that people don't recycle at the moment. I don't recycle plastic bottles, for instance. In Europe, we have almost 80% recycling on plastic bottles. They're probably solved, as far as I'm concerned. We could do a little bit better, but not much. I like to do the ones that are 1%. That's much more fun. That's a challenge. Then you can have a really big impact, even if your technology isn't perfect. And so we'll talk a bit about that too. Okay. Just the black text slides. This is my visual cue to me, and I'm supposed to give my opinion on something. So I work in biorefining in part because I think we need a carbon source. So I often talk about decarbonization. I usually talk about defossilization. So chemicals, organic chemicals, are going to have carbon in them. They can't be decarbonized. It's kind of a funny term. We're going to decarbonize chemicals. Like you can't. Literally, they have carbon. They can't be decarbonized. But they can be defossilized. So we can stop having that sort of fossil fuel source upstream. And there are a lot of challenges to this. When I was a student, there was a popular saying, I guess, but in STEM chemistry, that if we switched fuel sources, then we could use all of the petroleum to make chemicals. I was like, this is ludicrous. That's a ludicrous idea. 93% of a barrel of oil goes to make petrol, gasoline. 93%. If we didn't need petrol, we would have no use for that 93%, just hydrocarbons. They would be useless. We would stop drilling for oil. There is no universe in which we still have a petrochemical industry without petrol. It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense at all. We would have to burn the hydrocarbons to get to the good stuff. So it doesn't work. There's no setup for that. There would have to be some sort of fundamental shift in the way that's done. I find that very unlikely. So those two would have to go together. So if we don't take the benzene out of where are we going to get it from? So where are we going to get the building blocks that we use to run the chemical industry if it's not going to come from petroleum? And there are only a few options here. And the reason I say heat versus power is the biggest issue in this whole thing. 20 years ago, when we had no renewable energy, basically, chemical engineers were taught thermodynamics 1, heat and power cycles. It's very easy. The Rankine cycle, one's a power station, it's about 25% efficient. So that means you need 4 watts of heat to make 1 watt of electricity. So you should never electrify anything you can run with steam. Bad idea. You can turn electricity into heat, it's 100% efficient, more or less. But you can't turn heat into electricity, bad idea. So you want to run things on heat, not electricity. That is shifting. So Europe is, as a whole, is about 44% renewable. So as we get less and less, more and more away from those heat sources, so that would be solar and wind, produce electricity without producing heat. Nuclear still goes through the heat cycle. So actually, you're still better off with the heat, not the electricity. But solar and wind, it's okay to do electricity. So this makes an interesting question. How much can we move away from this sort of heat-driven, this thermally driven chemical industry? And it's a good question. And some of my colleagues who are very fond of electrical chemistry, I'm very fond of it, but think that we can run the entire chemical industry that way. I'm not so sure. Not because I think it will work, but because I don't think we're going to be able to access that electricity. You look at the UK, for instance, has these absolutely insane electrification ideas. We're going to triple the requirements in order to run all of our vehicles electrically by 2030, now I think it's 2035. And then we're going to electrify everything else, and then we're going to electrify this. And doing calculations, actually, we're going to need 10 times the electrical grid entirely powered by renewable energy. Right now, the UK is about 22%. So that means we're going to need 50 times our current output in 10 years. I find that laughable. So I think industry is probably quite low on the priority list for electrification. So it may come, but I think I'm going to be old when this happens. So I don't think it's going to happen in the next half century. It's going to take us a long time to reach the infrastructure. And so I think this is really important to know. I do a lot of electrochemical research. I think it's very important, but that's a long-term thing. I don't think that's a short-term thing. I just don't think we're going to get there. And that problem, I have to say, links into the idea of can we run the chemical industry on CO2, which I don't do. So I don't do very little of any CO2 utilization research. Not because I don't believe in it, but because I don't think that we're going to have the power to implement it in the near term. I think it's going to be a while before we have enough excess renewable energy to run the chemical industry with CO2 and carbon. I would love to be wrong. The reason I don't do research in it is that problem, which I see as the biggest problem, is a thermodynamic issue. And everybody in that field makes better catalysts. It doesn't fix the thermodynamic issue. There's a delta G gap between CO2 and everything else. And you cannot solve that without putting energy in. So to me, we need a really big leap in our power generation before that will work. And I just don't see how research is going to solve that problem. It's an infrastructure issue. So I don't work with it. I still like it though. It's quite cool, the things people make from CO2. Okay, so the research part of this talk. The basis of this was actually a paper before I even worked on it. It was a really, really cool paper. It was in Jackson in 2002. In 2004, there was a follow-up from Robert Rogers on how ion-liquids could dissolve cellulose at room temperature. And at that time, cellulose dissolution was awful. I mean, there's two organic solvents that dissolve cellulose, but the nastiest organic solvents, NMO and NP, and then liquid ammonia and things like that. But it's very, very difficult to dissolve cellulose. And he and John Holbrook showed a couple of these ion liquids would dissolve cellulose. First, this one at the top, about 70 degrees, and then this one later on they showed would dissolve at room temperature. 20% cellulose into another liquid. That's incredible. That's just great. Unfortunately, the field became quite obsessed with the idea that this was a great way to make biofuels. So we would dissolve wood, decrystallize all the cellulose because it's in solution, and then you can sort of run through to enzymatic conversion and fermentation, and you can make ethanol. But there were two really big problems with this sort of concept. One is that the ionic liquid itself, this ionic liquid in particular, the acetate, is extremely expensive. I'll talk about that in a moment, and actually unstable. So it breaks down around 90 degrees. And they have to run the process at 120. So they lose about a third of their solvent every time they run the process, which is not great. According to my calculations, you can lose 0.03% of that ionic liquid if you want to make money. They were losing 30%. The second problem is there's a lot of drying steps required. So drying. So you have to dry the liquid, you have to dry the solvent, you have to dry everything. Because it will dissolve 20% cellulose in the ionic liquid if it's dry. If it has 0.3% water, it won't dissolve cellulose anymore. So it works, but it's actually really more of a research curiosity than anything especially applicable because wood is not dry. And the last thing we're going to do is spend all of our energy drying off the water. And so this was a problem. And I'm not very imaginative, so I said, I don't think this problem can be solved. So why don't we avoid it? We'll go the other way. It's really hard to dissolve cellulose, but why do we need to? Why not dissolve lignin instead? So we won't dissolve all of the biomass, we'll dissolve half of it. And then all of our reactors are split in two. So half the capex, which is great. And now we can use practically any solvent that we want. We just need one that will take apart the wood matrix, which is much, much easier. A lot of solvents will dissolve lignin, not very many will dissolve cellulose. A lot of lighter things. And so this, again, I'm not very imaginative, so I called it ionosol because I used to work in organosol pulping. It's like organosol with iron liquids, so we'll just call it ionosol, which is a great name, but doesn't really tell you much. But that was really the key feature, was that it is an extraction rather than a dissolution precipitation. So it's a much easier process, much more simple. And what you end up with is extremely pure cellulose. In the laboratory, we get around 97% cellulose in our pulse. In Lixi's pilot plant, they're up over 99%. So it's actually somewhat more efficient than crop pulping, which is about 94. Lignins in solution, if you want to do something with it, you have to recover it. The process, we'll talk about that in a moment. You could use a bio-based solvent if you want. Technically, Lixi does, but I don't usually talk about it that way because it really depends on how it's made. But the important thing was this drove down solvent costs. We'll talk about costs in a moment. And you can see this is some of the pulps that we get out. So that's one of the ones with the laboratory protocol, and that's Lixi's pilot. So that is unbleached cellulose. Obviously, incredible. It looks good. I'll show you some bleached ones later on. They're even great. Actually, they are some bleached cellulose. So even better. So it's a great idea. It's a great way to get very pure cellulose, but I don't actually know why I was thinking this was a good way to make biofuels. So at the time I said, well, this is all great for biofuels, but actually cellulose is much more valuable than sugar. So why wouldn't we just sell the cellulose? Sort of business 101, sell the most valuable product. This is the thing that led to all those silly citations and things I didn't mention. This is the bit that caught everybody's attention, was economics. So this is an engineer wading into a field that's completely dominated by chemists and saying, have you guys really thought about technical economic analysis? No, I haven't. I'm not even an expert in technical economic analysis, but I'm an expert enough to do it. And I went through the different line of liquids and trying to answer this question, why are they so expensive? And this is the fuel cell that are like the most famous of them. 1-butyl-3-methyl-midazoline bis-trifluoromethane sulfonate. That's a very long name. If it has a very long chemical name, it's probably extremely complicated to make, which is true. It requires 34 synthetic steps to make. That's a lot of synthetic steps. We'll talk about that in a moment. If you try to buy it from Sigma, it costs about $2,500, pounds, euros, it doesn't matter which one, per kilogram, which is about the same price as silver. I ran an economic model. I said, okay, what if we built a plant that made 100,000 tons a year of this? How much would it cost then? Because they can say, oh, you just kill it, it would be cheaper. $190 a kilogram. The most expensive solvent in the market, $2.50. This is $190. It's 100 times more expensive than any solvent we have ever made at commercial scale. No chance that this will ever be a commercial solvent. Zero possibility. They can use it as a fuel cell electrolyte if they really want, and people do. But it's not going to be a solvent. That's not even sensible. There's a DP-Tech solvent, which you can buy from Silex. It's about $60 a kilo. You can bring that down. I think at scale, you can go 4 or 5. So not bad. It's certainly in range, but they're making it sort of 50 kilogram scale at the moment, about 60. Phase transfer catalyst, same price. That cellulose dissolving solvent, the ASF says it costs about 40. My model says at scale, if you get it down around 10. It's still 4 or 5 times more expensive than any solvent in the market. These are mine, $2.20, 78 cents, and 55 cents. That's the one that Lucy's pilot, 55 cents. It doesn't cost us 55 cents yet, it costs us about €1 a kilo right now. So we haven't quite gotten it down all the way. The price of gas went up. Unfortunately, for us around somewhere between polyamine and acetone. The polyamine is around 80, acetone is about 130. So that's sort of in that ballpark. I won't talk much about LCA, but it's always going on in the background. So this is the LCA of these solvents against some alternative organosolvents, acetone, glycerol, biodiesel. And they have the bottom line is If you look at the solvent itself, it has a higher environmental impact than the organic solvents. If you look at it in the process, it has a lower environmental impact than the solvents. So actually, it really does depend on how you use it in the process. And that has a lot to do with the energy savings in the process. The more energy up front, less energy in the process. I do think that's really important. Okay, this is how you make it. It's actually the BF4. I stole it from Bill Jessup. I was too lazy to write the one with the ATF2, so I did the BF4. So it's only 29 synthetic steps. This is how you make it, 29 synthetic steps. The most synthetic steps for an organic solvent is acetyl nitriles, 4 steps. 29, 4. That's why it's expensive. If you want to do an E factor, I don't even know. I tried to do it, and it frightened me, but it's somewhere between 100 and 1,000. So it's a lot of waste. There's a lot of fun chemicals in here, like HF. You can't make a carbon. There are 2 ways to make a carbon-fluorine bond, HF or F2. HF is the less dangerous one. That's great. Yeah, that's what we really want more of. It's more HF. Anyway, it's never going to work. This is mine. 6 steps. If you have a power plant nearby, you can have the sulfuric acid for free, and then it's 4 steps. So we're sort of in that solvent range. So, my biggest contribution to the field of ionic liquids is that I have incontrovertibly demonstrated that sulfuric acid is cheap. It's the most produced chemical in the world. 700 million tons a year of sulfuric acid is made as a waste product from power stations. So we don't even make it on purpose. So of course it's cheap. It's actually free, to be honest. Anyway, if you make a solvent half out of something free, it doesn't cost very much. You'll see a lot of these TEAs and LCAs. Sort of talk about them in passing. Most of them are based on petrochemical routes. So I usually base especially my LCA, I usually base on petrochemical routes rather than bio-waste routes. I work in bio-waste chemicals, and yet I always talk about the petrochemical alternative. And I think this is very important. You can do it both ways, and we do in research, but I think it's important. In the near term, we want to have an impact. So if the process is more sustainable, you want to get it out into the marketplace as quickly as you can. And that means you don't want to build up a supply chain for the solvent in the process. You want to develop the process, not the solvent. And so right now, I'm more focused on using the petrochemical ingredients. If we can swap the chemical industry over, then we can use the bio-based ingredients. But I don't think it's very sensible for me to try to build an entire supply chain to do one process. That's a bad idea. So I'm trying to isolate things as much as possible. It's a strategy. But it's a way of dealing with sort of industry or the marketplace as it exists right now, rather than always trying to project it into the future. If we're always projecting it to the future, we will have no impact. We'll just be talking about this utopia in 2020 when I was a student, and then it was 2030, and then it was 2050. Sometimes now it seems to be 2080. But yeah, we'll have this utopia in the future, but not if we keep talking about it in those terms. How do we get there? And the way we transition through it is to live with what we've got right now and make that better. And then when we revolutionize things later on, we can make it even better. But if we're always going for perfect, we're never going to have any change at all. And in the near term, I think there's going to be mass balancing. BASF has won this battle with the European Union. I'm not sure it's a good idea. In fact, I don't think it's a good idea. But whatever, it's going to happen. It's probably better than what we're doing right now. So, okay, we can live with it. So in the short term, we have things that are going to happen. And I think lesson number 1 for me, as a chemical engineer doing a chemical startup, don't try and turn yourself into BASF. They're the largest chemical company in the world. I remember one time a co-founder of mine were asked in an interview, what's your biggest competitor? I think she said Shell, I can't remember, but one of those. And I was like, we've already lost. If you think your biggest competitor is one of those oil giants, you've lost. You cannot compete with them. BASF has spent 200 years building up their infrastructure. Ludwigshafen, I have people in that company a lot. Could they build Ludwigshafen again today? No. There's no way that plant could be built right now. It's impossible. So that was a different era. So they are running off of assets that are fully depreciated in an era where they could be done. And they can't be done now. And so you have to do something different. Don't try and repeat that. Okay. This is our process. Very pretty. I drew this diagram. The reason I put it up there is for later on. So this diagram I first drew on my whiteboard in my office to a bunch of chemists. They're like, what's those little arrows? Right? I mean, seriously. And then they do the mechanism with the curly arrows. I'm like, what are those things? You have to do a little bit of translation between disciplines. But to draw this out, and some of the key differences about how the water goes through the process to save water management and that sort of thing. And it's really, really important to keep that view in mind. And we did this very early on in the research. So to try to think about what you might look at, to identify where there are problems. And then that's like free research projects, right? I mean, we have an issue that we're using too much energy in the evaporator, wherever the evaporator is, there is, versus the amount of water we need in the living precipitation. So can we match these water streams up, and then we have a zero discharge process, at least in theory, not in practice, and that sort of thing. So I drew that on my board. We drew this up for a paper in 2017, and probably the proudest moment of my career, I got to see it in steel in Sweden. I'll show a picture of it later, the real process. And it is basically what I drew on my whiteboard. It's basically that. Oh, my colors are actually nicer colors. I hope they don't mess with the dress later on, but we'll see. We've published, I don't know, something like 60 papers on this topic. I mean, they're a lot of fun and talking about the 98% cellulose source and 97, it's actually 98. Really high sugar yields that you can get if you want to make biofuels. Solvent recovery is insanely high. Elixir has been running their pilot plant for 3.5 years now, and on the same solvent they put in 2022. So they haven't changed any solvent, no makeup solvent. They've run the same solvent around that for 3.5 years. They sent me a sample every 6 months to do mass spec on. We have detected no degradation after 3.5 years. So I'm pretty sure it's a one, which is nice. It does biodegrade, so that's good, but it doesn't decompose in the process. My student had an interesting sense of humor, so she likes to put her cellulose out into interesting shapes. I'm not sure what those represent. You can fractionate the lignin, which is quite important. So we have a lot of actually customers for lignin because we can have lignin with controlled properties. And since the lignin is precipitated by water addition, actually it happens whether we want it to or not. So we can get lignin in different molecular weights just by not having the water around. So you get a lot of things that you can manipulate inside the process. I'm not sure what that bubble was. Very pure cellulose. But that recycling was actually really the key. I mean, that was the thing that launched the pilot. And here was my technical economic analysis that I did in 2017, and you'll see it again later on, for how much money you could make at a 100,000-ton plant. It's got a nice margin, 46%, not too bad. So a good IRR. What's the basis of that? It is effectively two things. Lower capex, which is nice, and higher product value, so pure products, so you don't have to do as much purification downstream. Those are the two real keys to that working. And the reason that the OPEX is so low in this is basically this. Because we're using a salt, the one thing we get for free is nothing in the vapor phase. So we don't have to control that heat of vaporization. So we're not making steam, which is really, really important. Vastly lowers your energy input. And when I published this analysis in 2017, I calculated out that the minimum glucose selling price would have been 18 cents a kilo. And on that day, sucrose, cane syrup, was at a 30-year low. The price is 22 cents. So I said, okay. Second generation sugar, first generation sugar are about the same. I'm not so confident in my economic analysis that 18 and 22 are different, because they're about the same. And I'll show you a picture of what happened later on to those two prices, because it's quite entertaining. And here's the bleached cellulose. So this is the cellulose that comes out of our process. And here it is after our first sort of short bleach and a longer bleach. And we do electrochemical bleaching in the laboratory, which is quite fun because we have a salt. Because the salt is a conductive medium. And so actually the electrochemical bleaching works brilliantly well. So you don't have to add chemicals. You just add electricity and the lignin just vaporizes out of it. The last 2% of the lignin just sort of oxidizes right out. Absolutely incredible. And that's the pulp. So So that's the regular pulp. I showed you that earlier. That's the bleached pulp. You can see it's nice and fluffy here. Actually, very pretty pulps that you can make. When we're making textiles out of it, Elixir is going to normally mix dissolvable lysol. Okay, that's probably the end of the science. So from here, it's going to be all the pictures, which is fun. So this is a meter we found by INCORCP. Francisco, he's the CEO of Nanoworks, and Ian is the CEO of Arisen. You'll hear a bit more behind it in about 10 minutes. But the three of them started their PhD in the same, Amir and I were on the same day in Francisco a few months earlier. They graduated on the same day. So I had 3 CEOs giving their PhDs on the same day. And so that was a picture of them before. There's one of them in the galleries later on, but that was a picture of them right before graduation. That was incredible. One of the most surreal moments I've ever had. This is from that article I wrote for chemistry, and I took that economic analysis of elixirs and I projected it into the future. I said, okay, or into the past in this case, but I took it from when I did it in 2014 to today. Today at that point was in December of 2023. And the reason I thought this was entertaining is you can see red is market sugar, so that's cane syrup. And then I did 2 estimates for elixirs glucose, so cellulosic sugars. One was the one from that paper, and the second one was I decided that I had underestimated the capex in that paper, so I just increased the capex by 50%. So that's actually probably more realistic, because I think I underestimated the capex. So I upped it by about 50% based on things we know now. And what you can see is that we would indeed have made a profit in 2014, and then a loss. And then a profit, a big profit, and then a loss. And then enormous profits. And sugar reached an all-time high in 2023. One of the interesting things about biorefining, like I say, you can see it over here with wood chips, which is natural gas versus sugar. You can see it right here with elixirs, cellulosic sugar versus cane syrup. The price of market sugar, or cane syrup usually, it's also beet syrup, but is entirely reflective of the price of natural gas. It's about a 3-month delay. Because the biggest cost in commercial agriculture, fertilizer. And fertilizer is made from ammonia, and ammonia is made from natural gas. So it's not even energy, it's literally the price of natural gas that's driving that. Yeah, that's strange, isn't it? I did not know that when I started this. Insane. So, you can see the price of sugar and the price of natural gas mirror each other perfectly. And so, this was the drop in energy prices in 2014. This was that huge bump in 2016, which I can't for the life of me remember what it was. And this was that very unfortunate period right before the pandemic, when it was predicted that the price of gas, the price of oil, would not go above $30 a barrel before the year 2030. And then Russia invaded Ukraine, and boom, shot up immediately. The lesson that I take out of this, anybody who prognosticates the price of energy is crazy. We have no idea. At this point right here, we thought this would keep going forever because we did not predict geopolitical instability, despite the fact that we have 10,000 years of human history suggesting there will be nothing but geopolitical instability. But we said, well, it'll never happen, right? We're done with this. We're not done with this. And so this is crazy, but the price of timber does not really change very much. A little bit, this is the pandemic basically causing a little bit of an increase, but it really doesn't, we don't fertilize trees. So actually it doesn't make any difference. It's a little bit of fuel cost, but very low. And so I actually think this is the biggest strip of biorefining that's been like that. No, we're still okay. I have an escape on this, but I have to get ready to use it. So, other interesting lessons that I have learned. I thought that running research or R&D in a startup company would be a lot like being an academic with a research place. Nothing like that. The focus you have to maintain in commercial research is quite extraordinary. Anything that's a distraction is bad because you've got goals and you have to meet those goals. when academics tell the funding council, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we think will happen, but it probably won't because it's research and things happen. You get the money, you do the project, something else happens, it's interesting, but not what you said, it's okay. You do that with investors in a startup company, it's not okay. That's their money. You're supposed to deliver what you told them, not something else. So you don't really have the luxury of going off in other directions. And the timelines are really strict. You said June, it's July, that's not okay. So you don't have that sort of relaxed attitude to deadlines that academics like me. The other thing that I learned that I thought was quite interesting, actually the technology really doesn't matter very much. The investors, the market, nobody cares. Nobody buys technology. We do not buy technology. Even when we talk about technology, we don't buy technology. I love my phone on the desk, but we don't buy that phone because of the technology. We don't care about the computer chips inside. That's not why we buy it. We buy it for what it gives us. Access to information and people. So we buy the products, not the technology. And so the technology in the tech startup is a means to an end, and honestly, nobody cares about it. Nobody wants to know how it works. Nobody cares how it works. Even the investors don't care how it works. They don't even find it interesting. I'll show some examples of this. The other thing that I was interested in, how long this takes. If you told me this at the start, I'd never have done it. So Lixia's lab discovery was in 2008. It was a PhD studentship, so about £200,000. Imperial's prices are crazy. But, 6 years later, we were running things in a 1 liter lab scale reactor. And then we started doing commercial activity. So we did 30 liters, that's in New York, at the Bioreactor Development Center. This is at Biotech Europe in Ghent. It's a 200 liter, it's a 200 liter reactor right there. You can sort of see part of it. It's Aggie, co-founder. It's actually a lot cheaper to access these facilities, and you get to do these really huge volumes, but you can't write a paper anymore. Nobody wants to see the same thing at bigger scale. That's not very interesting. There's Lixia's pilot plant in Sweden. That's the thing I drew on my whiteboard. Absolutely incredible. There's the living precipitation unit there. You can't see the biomass reactor. 5 million euros to build this absolutely beautiful thing, but we're done. This is no longer academic. It's understanding. There's a beauty shot, but this is not a real artist rendition. This is a photo of the site where the development plant's going to go. Really big projects. Now, if we built a commercial plant, it'd be even bigger and even more expensive. So the money goes up. It's basically the same science through. But you notice this timeline: 2008, 2014. We're still doing research. 6 years. Start doing commercial stuff. We get to scale up 3 more years. Pilot plant, 5 more years. Demo plant, 4 more years. 18 years in. And when I show this timeline to people at BP or something, they're like, wow, you guys move fast. 18 years, that's impressive. How did you get to the commercial demo 18 years after a lab discovery? It takes a long time. And so if you're a student and you're working on a project and you would like to see it in the commercial space at full scale, you're going to be my age when it happens. So just be ready for that. It takes a very, very long time. And you can't skip steps. That's how companies are backwards. Anyway, the basis of this actually had nothing to do with that. It was about the application. We noticed that whether we did softwood grasses or even softwood grasses together, we basically got the same results. And so we could get all the sugar out, no matter what the feedstock was. We could do high biomass loadings. We could do almost anything. It would work quite well. And so I said, what's the worst, nastiest feedstock in the world? Back in 2017, and I came up with stuff. So this is pressure-treated lumber. This is the stuff we put in construction waste. So the stuff that comes out of construction waste. This is the stuff we make buildings out of. All the timber is green because it has about 1% copper in it. And then we add about 1% arsenic. We don't do this anymore. It was banned in the European Union in 2000. But we tear down our buildings, not new buildings. So it's no longer going in, but it's coming out. In fact, it will peak in landfill in 2061. So it's the highest landfill rate in 35 years from now. So it's still going on. And then we bind it with about 1% copper. So this wood is about 3% nasty stuff. Iron liquids are salts, so they complex out nasty stuff. And so when we do this, the metals just come right out. We electrify them to get them out talking about carbon, to kind of incredible. And this was what got us the company, because there's a huge market for this. It's illegal to incinerate it. There's some specialty waste disposal facilities in Sweden, but for the most part, it's illegal to incinerate it. The UK companies pay about £130 a ton to make it go away. That's a lot of money to get rid of waste. It's 4 million tons a year in the UK. It's just money that's being settled apart. Now, my slides. Let's look at the slides. Look at that. Beauty shot with trees and okay, well, I think highlight this. So I mentioned the technology is not important. So this is Lixi's pitch deck to investors. It is interesting. You'll see what I'm missing. This is about half of it, so I left out the 5 pages. This is the first half. And waste to wealth. So this is my research statement. It's just a bunch of pictures of biomass. And our products, right? So let's leave it for this is what comes out of our process. One step, these 3 things out, 3 phases, right? That's the gas. So 3 phases of the product. And so this is sort of the thing. These are all the products we see. We've got so many, 30 or 40 different products that they've made. So somewhere I've got the full calorie set that they made from the waste. So it's really impressive. Pictures. This is, good God, I could never do this in a presentation of mine. All the words on that slide. There's like 5 words on the slide. Like paragraphs and things. This is what they do. To talk about the future, right? We're doing a materials plant right now. On the next, it's going to be one that we build next year. And then a bioethanol plant in North America, which was going to be in the United States, but I have a sneaking suspicion now I became. Can't imagine why. And then the biogas plant, that's planned in the Netherlands. And then the big recycling plant for the waste wood. Why is the waste wood that we started with not going into commercial space until 4th? Because we got our technology to TRL 8, but the electric deposition is still at TRL 4 or 5. And one thing at a time. So we're developing one technology, not 2. So we're giving some space for that to scale. So we learned. And look at this in the market, it's huge, and the plant's going to make money. I have no idea how it's going to make money. I mean, really important. It's all business stuff. It's all economics, right? Financials. This is what's in Lixi's pitch deck. This is a tech company, right? This is the sort of science slide. I made this, the graph. I don't know, they moved mine when I had this talk down here. They moved it up. I made this. This is how much value you get from our process versus how much it costs to make it. And this is really the same thing I was saying earlier. Our big advantage is our process costs less. And they've developed the technology enough that the pulp is probably more valuable than craft pulp because they're making dissolving pulp. So they're saying now it's high. When I did it was zero. But that's sort of the competitive slide, right? And this is what you see in the pitch deck. So the technology gone, the science gone, chemical structure don't make me laugh. Our technical slide deck doesn't have chemicals in it. No, it's no chemistry. Don't do that. Products, yeah, you can talk about products, but that's all. It's really all about markets and growth and that sort of thing. So when I say that the activities are different, I mean, there's nothing in this that I was prepared for. This is not what chemical engineers do. We can understand it, but we don't do it. And I designed that filter. It was a product, so it works. I was shocked. That worked. Anyway, that's well, that's all. I have This is it. This is the whole plan. It's just a little cartoon. Okay. The last thing I want to mention. I talked earlier about why I think startups are important. And I said it's because I'm losing faith in other drivers, market drivers, bringing this through. Talking to governments, especially the UK government and the EU government, those are the ones that I pay attention to. I don't have any idea what the US is doing. I mean, our beloved president may have changed his mind since breakfast this morning. I mean, there's no way of knowing what is going on in the United States, so we will leave that aside for the next 3 years. The UK and the EU both are convinced that decarbonization of the economy is proceeding very rapidly. This is not true. Decarbonization of transport is going much faster than it was before. Renewables are making good entry into the energy space, and I have a lot of faith that power will be reasonably decarbonize in the next 10 years. When we start expanding the grid, that won't be true anymore, but for the moment, it looks okay. You read the propaganda that suggests that we're going to be recycling everything by 2030. The textile industry, which is what I'll close with, has said that they're going to go from 15% recycled content to 100% recycled content by 2030. They were at 15% when they made this pledge in 2020. They're still at 15% right now. They haven't moved an inch. And defossilization, rather than decarbonization, will be complete by 2050. I don't believe this, but this is what everybody seems. This is what we're saying is going to happen as a result of the Paris Accords. This is what has to happen. But you talk to the chemical industry, especially, this is great timing, especially in the last 12 months, both Shell and BP have said, you know what, this is too, we can't do this. It's going to be 2078, one of them's in 2078, and the one's in 2083. So they're saying, the people who are making stuff are saying 60 years. But we're still saying it's going to happen in the next 20. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but what do they know that we don't? Something. So, while it would be nice to say, well, we'll just replace the fossil fuel industry, we can't. We cannot do that in 20. That is impossible. That supply chain is massive. The infrastructure there is tremendous. There is no way we could build that up in 2 decades. If we bent all of our resources to doing it, we still couldn't do it. So either they have to go aboard with this transition, or we have to accept their timeline. So one of those two things is going to have to give. Startups are the only way to make this, force this issue. So the more of these more sustainable technologies we bring into the market and at least demonstrate they're viable, the fewer excuses the industry has for not adopting them. You say you can't do this, but you can do this. So to my mind, the importance of startups is to show what can be done. And if you can show it can be done, and you show it can be done profitably, then the larger industry has to adopt it. They will have no choice. So leave them fewer excuses, basically. And hopefully that will work. And then maybe we'll get these, well, maybe the second, I think that first one's gone, but the 2050 one, I think is still in play. Okay. This is, forget this slide. I stood in the middle. So this picture, I was in the middle. They could not cut me out. There you go. It's the only excuse. I have no idea what Florence is holding there. But Aggie does seem completely fascinating. I'm ignoring her. Aggie's holding shit 2 miles. I'm really looking at it. But that's it. The last lesson I want to mention, just because it's nice pictures. So Ida here, my co-founder, Guy did a PhD with me. It followed on from Florence, the founding CEO of Elixir, and now the CTO of Elixir. She did the follow-on. Instead of doing treated timber, so construction waste, I was like, let's go to the landfill. Let's dig up some MSW that's been sitting there for a while and see what it would look like. And I mean, I don't have money. I mean, we've got plastic and glass and all these things in there. And if you analyze the heavy metal content, lead, arsenic, cadmium, copper, zinc, chromium, and nickel were the ones we tracked. There were others in the next selenium. I mean, all sorts of weird things. Disgusting. Lead from paint, of course. Because a lot of this was painted wood. And the arsenic and the copper I already mentioned. I don't actually know where the cadmium comes from. I think it's also some cadmium-based paints. All these disgusting things in there. And I just showed it as fun. You know, I don't think we would take out the metals no matter what they are, no matter how much of it you try to load in there. So the metal extraction is great. And you can even go to high biomass livings, and you still get pretty good glucose out. But we couldn't commercialize this because we already had. So she watched a Netflix documentary on fast fashion, and she said, I wonder if we could do something like that. What would happen if we put textiles into that process? And that led to dye recycling, which is a great thing. We recycle the unrecyclable. It was really nice. I don't like the name. That's silly. But we recycle the unrecyclable. That's a great phrase. Some of them are really bad in my startups, but we have some terrible names there. But that's a great tagline. And it's basically the idea is that, okay, we have figured out how to recycle PET bottles because they're just PET. Especially these days, even the cap can be PET. The whole monoplastic. Very rare in the industry to come across monoplastics. So this one we're pretty good at. Europe, like I said, is probably around 80%. Some places like Germany are over 90%. That's actually quite impressive. UK is a little bit lower in the 70s. But still, really, really good. PET, there's actually more PET in textiles than in bottles. And PET textiles we recycle at a rate of 0.7%. So 81. So again, I don't know why people even bother with this. It's not, it's solved enough. This is a problem, and a big one. 92 million tons a year, and we recycle less than 1 million tons. That's a problem. It's a big problem. And you see lots of weird things happening with this. The reason that we can't recycle this and we can recycle this has got stuff in it. It's got about 3% dye to make it colored, because I like so 3% dye. And if you melt this in a thermomechanical recycling plant and you reprocess it, you will get black degraded yarn. Black because the dyes degrade, and when the dyes degrade, they actually react with polymers, and so the polymers degrade. And so you get bad polymers with a bad color. And so all you can make is black textiles from the black textiles. It's the, or from colored textiles, it's the only option. So we can make everything black. That's one thing. Or we can take the dyes out. And so Dye Recycle's entire company is based on the idea of taking the stuff out of this. It's not just dyes, there's coatings and finishing chemicals and PFAS and all sorts of nasty things that the product was. We just take it out. Same extraction process, one polymer that we're going to leave behind and we're going to take out everything else. So again, Dye Recycle slides. Dye Recycle doesn't have quite as much money, so our slides definitely isn't quite as fancy. But same idea, sort of blended textiles, take the stuff out, recover the dyes, right, and then we can recycle the dyes. So send them back for other things. And you can also look at PFAS and heavy metals. Yes, there's PFAS and heavy metals in our clothes. There's also cotton, of course. It's about 40% cotton in textiles, and so we can remove that too. But this is sort of the driving force for the technology. And this is our technology slide. Little pictures with arrows and pluses. That's it. No chemistry. We don't even say what salt we use. That the word iron liquid does not appear in this project. And it works really, really well. This company is only about 3 years old, so we made quite a good product. Dark black, white, fluorescent yellow, white. There's a uniform, actually. We did the Olympic scrims from the Paris Olympics, too. To color that out. And all sorts of really weird things. And this is our goal: color stuff in, white stuff out. This can be recycled. This basically can. And so we're not a recycling company, we enable recycling materials that can't be recycled right now. That's what we tell ourselves. And I hope that works. It's an ambitious business plan. And we've done hundreds now of different things. This is part of our color palette, it's not even the whole thing with the different colors. So these are things that we have dyed with recycled dyes. And we can do anything. I love that yellow. It adds something. We did a fluorescent green one too. Really, really good. It's also fun because we get the fashion, especially in London, we get the fashion companies coming in to work with us on things. And so, back when Lixie was in my labs, they're gone now, but, we might have BASF coming to visit, or store at Enzo or something. Those are nice companies. Calvin Klein comes by to tell us about their 27 shades of blue. I mean, it's like, who's here today? Stella McCartney's here today, right? It's amazing. It's sort of like an everyday occurrence with all of these very recognizable fashion companies, which is quite fun. And we've had a few products that come out. I put this in here mostly because it's the biggest question we have. Can we recycle post-consumer waste? So stuff that people have worn. So this is stuff, literally, that came from shredding facilities. So we just bought some mixed post-consumer waste, shredded it, and decolorized it. Actually works better on post-consumer waste because it has some white in it. So it's actually lower dye content in mixed waste than there is in color waste. So actually we get better performance. And the first product launch that we did, this was last year with Karen Gucci. It's the parent company of Gucci. And the designer, apparently a famous Ugandan designer, though I don't know this design, this is the model. in this blue jumpsuit. So we dyed blue, which is quite fun. I was not impressed because I said, here's the company, our whole thing is that natural dyes come in pastel shades, synthetic dyes, vibrant colors. So we have sustainable, brightly colored dyes, and we do a pastel. It's like the worst thing. It's terrible marketing. But the commercial traction for this company is insanely high because everybody wants this solution. So, biggest lesson I've ever learned. Lixia was trying to push an alternative wood pulping technology, and the industry did not want it. They accepted it, but they didn't want it. People want this, and they don't have it. So there is no alternative at the moment. There will be soon. But there is no alternative. So first to market with the technology with market pull. Market pull, market push. Technology push. I can't even go low enough for a technology push. Market pull. Huge, huge. Everybody's behind you. And this is our beauty shop with the reactors, so we're only 20 kilograms scale. We aren't going to build a whole 30 ton, a small plant in a couple of years. But to try and do bigger this so it doesn't work at scale, it works at least at the 20 kilo scale. So it's 20 kilos of shredded textile that we decolored. That was whatever that purplish red color is, and it came out very white. I'm not sure you can see it all that well there. And we recovered the dyes from that we could use then to dye the fabrics. That's the reaction. And I added this picture. This is from Saturday. Oh, yes, there's an LCA, right? And so there's an 81% reduction in CO2 emissions. Very nice. This is important. But this dress was unveiled at London Fashion Week on Saturday, so 3 days ago. So I stole that picture and stuck it on this slide. It wasn't actually there. Patrick McDowell, who's the designer, designed this dress and we dyed it for London Fashion Week. So Lixia, Diary was all over the news this week in the fashion world because we have unveiled the first circular dyed garment. And pastel blue 2 years ago, look at that red. Oh, I was so insistent. I said, we are doing red and it's going to be bright red. And there it is. It's successful. It's absolutely incredible. I'm very happy with this. And yeah, I'm making a nice LCA. That's good. It's a very low energy process. Again, I'm a big believer in low energy processes. Okay, this is the end. So this is where I had the escape button. The last 5 minutes, I wanted to circle back to Clementine. So Clementine found did a PhD with me, same as Florence, so it was again the same day. They were actually appointed in the same studentship, really, one of them scholarship. So we could do 2. And she did the scale-up stuff that I showed earlier as part of Lixia's journey. And it's the most boring paper that I have ever published in my entire career. We took, in this case, this campus, what we did with wood chips, iron wood too. And we showed different particle sizes going in, we did the analysis and everything, what it looked like coming out. Honestly, it just looks the same. The pictures actually do it more justice than the data. But it doesn't matter. Then you don't have to chop up the wood. You don't have to grind anything. You can just stick in whole, which you probably could stick in an entire plant. You probably put a tree in that ionic liquid and it would take the liquid out. So this was quite important because it lowers our grinding costs. We don't have to shred everything down and grind it to dust. We can just run the huge wood chips. And Lixia, the plant does 4 centimeter wood chips. So quite standard. The same stuff they use in Incredible. So it works really well. Very boring paper, because all it says is there's no effective particle size. That's the whole paper, with lots of graphs. But she launched this company, Origin, and I always like to end with this because it's to me inspirational. I put that down. Do I need new technology? No. Clementine's PhD was on biorefining. Origin is a solar PV company. I don't know the first thing about solar PV. I did their economic analysis. That's about the only thing that we did in the research labs. But she was at some, it was climate kick, so the EIC climate kick program back 10 years ago did this thing called a journey. They sent people to different institutions in Europe back when the UK was part of the EU, we could do this. It sent people around to different locations in Europe to hear about different sustainable technologies, which is quite nice. And so one of the stops, Clementine met a researcher from, not even a researcher, MBA student from India, who was from Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest and the poorest state in India. And India has very large states. He's talking about electricity access. And of course, there's a billion people in the world who don't have access to electricity, about 2/3 of the world. And so she said, what's the cheapest way we can bring electricity to India? And the answer is decentralized solar grids. And the reason for that is there is no electrical grid in farming communities in India. So you don't have to compete with gas-fired power plants because there aren't any. And so not only is the solar electricity more sustainable, it's also lower cost because the only electricity they had before was diesel generators. And diesel is really expensive as a fuel, especially if you're in very rural communities. And so this was a brilliant, brilliant business innovation. The technology that they put in this company, the ID, nothing. They buy cheap solar panels from China and they assemble them in farming communities in India and they sell the electricity. That's it. That's their business. No engineering done, no research done, nothing. They solved the problem and they fixed the problem. Now, I often tell, especially students, if what you want is to have an impact, a positive impact in the world, stop doing research in the laboratory. Go find a problem and figure out how to solve it with stuff off the shelf. And Origins had more impact than all of my startups combined. Much more. Which you can see, this is from their newsletter from 2025, so I can still get the newsletter from them. They have 250 projects in now 5 districts in India. They crossed, I think it's 1.3 megawatt hours of electricity that they have installed in capacity. They've created 152 rural jobs, mostly incidentally for women, because in farming communities in India, women don't have a traditional source of employment, so they're also providing employment for a sector of society that doesn't get any. 42,000 customers, and they've saved 200,000 liters of diesel so far. Absolutely incredible. 4 million tons of CO2. This is impressive, I have to say. And it's had nothing to do with her research project. Nothing whatsoever. She saw a problem, she fixed the problem. And they win so many awards. I was nominating her for something. I said, can you send me your CV? And I have some awards, probably 10 that I've won, and some of them are very fancy. Given the introduction, Royal Society medals and this sort of thing. She has an entire page for her awards. It's about 60 awards that she won. And I mentioned they made a documentary about her. And when the Times of India, I think it's 2018, the Times of India listed the 100 most important people in UK-India relations. India is part of the Commonwealth, the UK's sort of last bastion of the empire. And on that list, number 1 was Queen Elizabeth II. And number 2 was, unfortunately, Boris Johnson. And number 38, Clementine Chipmunk. Absolutely amazing. At that time, 27-year-old PhD graduate from Imperial College. So, if you want to have an impact on the world, you will have an impact on the world. Don't do what I did, which was play around in the laboratory and pretend. Okay, this is my last trip. It's a nice picture of Heidi when she was a student. This is the first Dolly's that took out the textiles and everything. She doesn't work in the lab anymore. Okay, so to conclude, key takeaways. It takes a long time. If you have a great research idea, publish a paper. If you think you have a great business idea, it's probably going to make a bad paper. All the citations I have, they did not come from the papers that turned into the companies. DiaRecycle, we have never published that. I would have forbidden you from publishing its inner pieces. But I wrote a paper up, I said, oh, submit this, it's going to be a great paper. She said, no. Not allowed. I don't want people knowing what we're doing. Okay. So that's it. No paper. So I do think that those are mostly a mutually exclusive set of ideas. You have to decide which one you want. I mentioned about the technology, pretty harped on it. The other lesson that I think is important is when you talk to the bigger companies, it's really not always about money. And especially the fashion and textile companies, they don't really care if diary seconds technology makes things cheaper. They don't want it to be too expensive. But they're okay with a bit more money if it can be more sustainable. So they can market that because they're selling to consumers. And consumers will pay more, maybe, but they'll buy more from them. So we'll give them more market share. And they can put a price on that. So they have sort of their own internal calculation. So it's not always about money. They don't always do things for money. They often do things for reasons that I don't like to talk about too much, but to minimize disruption. So they want to do business as usual as long as possible. So why is diary recycling so powerful? We offer recycling companies the ability to do exactly what they're doing right now with a new feedstock. They love that. If we had to turn around and say, well, we'll do this decarbonization and you have to do a slightly different recycling, nothing. No impact. Why do we have impact? Because we let them do business as usual a lot more. And I do think that's an important lesson. There's much more value than money. They would rather not change things than make money, which is a bit sad, but true. And the hardest thing to do is to develop a technology and then try to commercialize it. That's really tough. The easiest thing to do is to solve a problem. I think that's it. Yeah, I'll give you pictures of my group. That's the rollout of Paul's very close to our office. We talked about that earlier. And my group bought me this suit when I became an associate professor. And they have an interesting sense of humor. This is a social distancing comment. They had an interesting sense of humor because they had a party for me. And we're all there. And there's engineers in the suits and the ties and the blue shirts and the dark blue trousers. I mean, engineering uniform. All my colleagues in my group never showed up. I said, what the hell? And then they all traipsed in dressed for a luau. Absolutely amazing with the Hawaiian lace and stuff, and presented me with this suit. And so I went and changed. It was fun. We have a great sense of humor. They do work very hard. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, for sharing with us some of the outcomes of your research and also all these great ideas. And now the floor is open to questions and comments, and we don't have a lot of time because the coffee break is coming up. It's coming up, but we still have maybe 10 to 12 minutes for questions and comments.
I always talk too much.
You can use the microphone.
Here's one.
I know there's coffee on the other end of this. So. I have 2 hours of chat left, so I'm looking forward to this.
Hello, thanks for the great work. My question is, the recovery of the dyes, does it also work with synthetic fibers?
With synthetic fabrics?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's our primary output. So synthetic fabrics, so mostly polyester that we recycle, but we can do any synthetic, really. It's a little more complicated with cotton, and it has to do with dye types. So synthetic fabrics are dyed with dispersed dyes, which are small chemical molecules. Natural polymers are usually dyed with reactive dyes, which is literally reactive, since you have to cleave the glucose bond in order to get the dye off. So actually, the synthetics are our core business technology is synthetic dyes. And I have to say, when I talk about it, and we show the pictures, it's not really a dye company. Our 90% of our revenue is on polymers, white polyester. That's it. The cost differential between our input, so pre-consumer waste polyester, if it's colored, it's about 100 euros a ton. If it's white, it's about 600 euros a ton. So that's our margin. It's a factor of 6 for taking the dyes out. I know that sounds ludicrous. It's true. That is a market driver. The world is running out of white polyester. It's one of the weirdest markets too. I didn't talk about this, the economics, but right now virgin polyester is cheaper than recycled polyester. It's about 50% difference. It's about 1,100 a ton for virgin PET, and it's about 1,500 a ton for recycled PET.
Okay, so thank you for the inspiring presentation. So it was really amazing to see how many startups and how many entrepreneurs that come from your team. So I was wondering, do you have some kind of special business training also for your students, or how do you manage to get these into the commercial state? So thank you.
I mean, yes, and no, it's an excellent question. I've been on a lot of accelerators, startup accelerators. So we get our business training usually from a startup accelerator. Imperial College does run 2 or 3, maybe even different ones. Most of the early business training we got, not coincidentally, but was because of my founders were female. And Imperial at the time had launched a very ambitious program to try and address the gender gap in startups, in tech startups. And the gender gap is quite simple. At the time, so it's probably 2017, 2018, the amount of money raised by all male founding teams was 9 times higher than the amount raised by all female founding teams. And so Imperial sought to address that. And since, okay, obviously I don't fall into this category, but the students that were interested in entrepreneurship group were women. And so they joined this accelerator. And then Clementine was the first, and Florence was the second. Clementine joined, and she saw how much Florence was winning. Sorry. Clementine started, she's winning all these awards and documents, and Florence said, I can do that. And so we started Vixia because of that. And then I even see these Clementine and Florence, and she says, well, I can do this too. And so now we do have a lot of business training inside the research group from the founders that are sort of still in contact with us. And so it's sort of a bit of a cycle. And I do joke about this a lot. I did not set out to do this. In fact, my postdoc supervisor, Tom, he asked me once when we were talking about commercializing some patents, and we found patents that led to Dixie. He said, do you think you'd want a company? I said, no. I'm kidding, I don't want to. I just want to do research and all that. I just want to be a professor. That's my ambition. Right? And here I am 10 years later, and we've got 11 companies. Right? It sort of snowballed. It became a thing. And now people come to work with me, they're like, can we do a company with master's students? And I'm like, no, we're not going to do a 6-week project with a bunch of companies. It's not how that works. But it has become a thing. And so a lot of that training early on was from the sort of dedicated programs. And I'm always very thankful that they don't run it anymore, but to the Imperial, which is now EMB, but the training for female founders. It was an incredible program. It really opened my eyes to how awkward the business world can be. And there are a lot of sad stories. I mean, we would go to pitch events with Florence, and I used to do pitches because Aggie, when we were fundraising, Aggie had twins. So she was out of commission. So Florence and I would all pitch events, and I mean, people would talk to me, like she's the CEO, right? But you could see that sort of bias really set in. I have to say it was a lot to take in at the time. I'll end with a very funny story about that. But after one of those pitch events, Florence was very nervous. She was a young student. She was very nervous, so she did pitch. She was awesome at pitching, much better than me. And then I'd answer questions because she couldn't handle questions. She got flustered. And we walk out of this event, and she's fuming. I mean, steaming mad. I'm like, what? I thought that went okay. And she turns to me and she said, you were such an academic. I said, what do you mean? She said, they asked you this question about scale up. You said, well, we could do this and we could do this. We might. She said, the answer was no. That was the answer, no. It was a one-word answer. You talked for 45 seconds. She's like, I'm never taking you to this again. And that was it. I was fired from the pitch events.
Thank you for the interesting presentation. Of course, it's not totally related to my area of research, but 2 months ago, I was at Imperial College London as a meeting scholar at the Center for Environmental Policy. Yeah, and it was really nice to see the environment there, to see how the professor, the student, they're engaging in the meeting and doing a fruitful discussion. It was really nice, but I'm always curious about something like we can see people are doing crazy research in their labs, but it's only limited to their labs and only limited to the startup application. But I'm curious how we can connect the labs with the industries or with the companies.
It is increasingly difficult. So I hypothesize, so I guess I can't prove this. One of the reasons that startups have become so prevalent in academia is industry is losing interest in early stage research. So when I was a PhD student, you had a lot of industry funded research that was fundamental still. Now, before I was a student, so 1960s, 1970s, you read research papers written by sort of DuPont or ExxonMobil, so fundamental science being done in industry. When was the last time that happened, right? I mean, nothing. That doesn't happen anymore. Then they would outsource it to universities. Now, what are they doing? They're outsourcing it to startups. So they will wait, let the academics do the crazy stuff, let the startups weed out which of the ideas are truly crazy and which ones actually have use. And when the startup gets mature enough, they'll buy the technology. So they have shifted their mode of interacting with technology development from TRL 0 to sort of TRL 1 to now sort of TRL 6, and sometimes higher. And so they're waiting longer and longer and longer to pick things up. So I would love to tell you that there's an easy way to do this, but I'm not sure it's even possible anymore. I think for the most part, industry-academia relations are growing more divided. We're splitting apart more and more and more. And I would love to tell you there's a way to reverse that, but I don't know what it is. But, you know, there are still PhDs in industry. It's not like they're not interested. It's just their financial and business constraints are very tight. And so they have a model of interacting with academics, and it is not on crazy fundamental ideas.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we reached the end of the time now. It's move to have a coffee, and it was a pleasure to hear the talk. And if you have more questions,